Okay, so let's talk about graphing really quick. And if you have nice numbers, and when I say nice numbers, if both of these go into 12 when it's in standard form, then I would do the intercept method. And especially for a later chapter where we have to graph a lot of equations, this is going to be super helpful. So what you do is you just sub in 0 for x and 0 for y. So input of 0, output of 0, and then you just shove them in. So if I go ahead and sub a 0 in, 3 times 0 is 0. So basically what's going to happen is that's all going to disappear. And so if you get this equation, right, technically you have this equation. So in my head, I just divide both sides by -4 and solve and get a -3. So in my head, I'm kind of like, oh, if I divide that by -4, I get a -3. And then I do the same thing for y. I go ahead and sub a 0 in there, which really is going to make that disappear. So basically, I get this equation. And so to get rid of multiplying, you divide. So I divide, and I get x equals 4. But again, I would just do that in my head and get 4. And I do this because these are nice numbers. If this was ugly like a 7 with a 12, I probably wouldn't do this method. All right, so at this point, to graph it, I am going to make my x, y. So here's your x, here's your y. So this is your y-intercept because the number's in the y spot. It's going to cross the y-axis. So 1, 2, 3, down. And then this is the numbers in the x spot with a 0. So this is your x-intercept. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I have a ruler. I'm just going to connect the dots. And so then I have, I graph my line, okay? That's usually the quickest way if these are nice numbers, all right? So let's do that again, and we will solve for y. So another method is to solve for y, because then you get your slope and your intercept. And so to do that, if there's any type of add or subtract here, that's what you have to use to cancel. So if I want to get rid of this 3x and there's add or subtract, the only way I can do it is by add or subtract. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. -4y equals -3x plus 12. And again, these do not add together because it's like cats and dogs. These are not like terms. So you can mush x's with x's, y's with y's, constants with constants, but these are not the same thing, so you can't add them together. All right, so now if you look, we're trying to solve for y. See how there's no add or subtract over here? So there's no way add or subtract is going to undo it. There's only multiplication, and to undo multiplication, you do the reverse divide. And you have to do it to everything. You can't just pick and choose. Okay, so I'm going to divide everything by 4 or -4. These cancel because they equal 1. So then this, fractions are good here. So if a negative divided by negative is positive, so I get 3/4. And since we're graphing, we really like fractions to graph. And then this guy is a -3 because a positive divided by negative is a negative. And again, you can either put plus a -3 or just -3. So that's kind of up to you. If you want to put this or plus a -3, up to you, as long as that 3 is negative either with a minus out front or plus a negative. Okay, so how does that help me graph? Well, if it's in this form, this is slope, which I don't know why I put a t there, is a rate. And remember, this is your y-intercept, which is your starting amount. And with business, this would be like your fixed cost, like what you started out at, and then this is your marginal cost, like how much you charge or how much it costs you to make one after that. So then you can keep track of your expenses. So always your starting amount. Same idea. I'm still going to make my little XY axis here. All right, and so let's see. I'm going to start at a -3, and again, this is on your Y axis always. And then since it's a +3, I'm going to rise, and which is positive direction, and I'm going to run. Now, that's because a +3 means to go up, and a +4 means to go to the right. Notice that if you have a negative divided by a negative, sorry, that's still positive. So two negative directions still make it positive. So I could rise negatively, which really means go down 3. And I could run negatively, which means go to the left 4. Two negative directions will end up positive. So let's just look at that. Now, this is your starting amount. So I'm going to rise 3, 1, 2, 3, and run 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and put a dot. Rise 3, 1, 2, 3, run 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now notice how the negative works, and I didn't leave a lot of space here. So, but notice going down 3, so 1, 2, 3, and going backwards 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, should still line up on my line. So two negatives, if you go back down and to the left, that's still going to keep your line having a positive slope. And so again, I would use a ruler, or on MyMathLab, you'd use a tool. And again, this part's off because I don't have graph paper, but you can do that. The other thing you can do is once you solve for y, if you can also fill out an input-output table. So I have what? Y equals 3/4 x minus 3. Okay, y equals 3/4 x minus 3. So the other thing you could do is, if you want to graph this, is you can make an input-output chart for your function or your equation. So here's your input and here's your output. So input in real life might be how many months the baby elephant has been growing, and then the output might be the weight of the elephant at that time. Okay, and obviously elephants don't start at a -3 pounds, so this isn't this. This could be a stock that you bought at a -$3 and it's going up 75 cents every month. So you're growing by 75 cents. So if you make an input-output chart and you have a formula, you have control over the input. This is called the independent variable. You have control over this. You can make up any numbers you want. Now sometimes students are like, oh, I'm going to put 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 because that's what you were taught to do as a child. But you're a little smarter now, and so 0 is always great. 1 is not always a great number. Look, you're going to get a fraction if you use 1. Do you see this denominator of 4? That's a clue that, yeah, unless you have multiples of 4, you're going to end up with a decimal or a fraction here. So instead of picking any old number for x, if you're going to do it this way, I would pick multiples of 4, like 4, 8, -4, -8. Okay? And then now you could just input that into a calculator. So if you don't feel super confident in your computation skills, and I might put my lamp on and see if that helps. So you could just take, 3/4 times 0 is going to be 0. You get a -3. But you could do like 3/4, and again, I'm just going to put my fractions in parentheses. You could use a fraction key, times 4 minus 3, because this formula is set up that you can just sub the 4 in for your input. So all I did is, on my calculator, I subbed the 4 in for input. So 3/4 times that minus 3, hit enter, and it gives me the output of 0. And then again, I could shove in my input. So I'm going to take parentheses 3/4 times, what do I have? 8. So times 8, and then minus 3. And then the formula gives me the output of 3. And what this does for me then is, then I have points to graph, right? So if I take this piece of graph paper, I need to go to 8 though, correct? So let me, not super straight, but again, this is a y-intercept. You see how there's 0 on the x, so -3 on the y. Don't turn those around, that is easy to do. For the numbers in the x spot with a 0, this is on the x-intercept. And then I have this point 8, 3. So if I go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, and then I can connect the dots and get my line. So, but again, these two are kind of slow, but this one's a little faster. But if you have ugly numbers, sometimes you don't have a choice. So sometimes if you have maybe like 3x plus, oh, let's see, I don't know. We'll do 5y equals maybe, let's say maybe 10, okay? And you're like, ooh, 5 goes in there, great. Well, you can do that part, but the problem is the 3, like that's not, 10/3 is not fun. So on this one, if it's ugly numbers, I'm probably going to solve for y. So the only time I cover up and do the 0 things, the intercepts, is if both numbers play nicely with this. So if this was a 15, I would do that method. But these numbers both don't go into 10. So I'm probably going to solve for y. There's adding and subtracting involved. The only way you can cancel is by adding and subtracting. All right, so these cancel. Okay. Now do you see how there's no adding, subtracting? So that's not going to do you any good. So you do the opposite or the reverse of multiplying, which is dividing. Divide everything. Okay, and this part actually turned out nice, which is super helpful. All right, so then I'm going to do the slope method to graph this. So I am going to make my x, y, and my start is here. Okay, so I'm starting at 2, always on the y-axis. Now, again, this is my slope, so I have -3 over +5. I only have one negative, so rise, I can't rise negatively, that means going down, so I'm going to go down 3. +5 means to go to the right 5. Now, I could move that negative to the bottom, okay? We usually don't write it there like that, but to think about it, we could. So this would be a +3, which means I'm really rising 3, but a -5 means I'm running backwards, okay? All right, so let's start with this one. I go down 3 and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I do it this way, I would rise 3, 1, 2, 3, and go backwards 5. And if your slope isn't going down, like if the line isn't going down like negatively, then obviously you made a mistake. So if your line's going up, right, then it's positive slope. This is definitely going down, so we want negative slope. Again, if you're like, I can solve for y, but I hate this. Every time I try to do it, I make a mistake. It's just not pretty. I have problems. Okay, so what you can do then is solve for y. But then what you can do is just make your own input-output chart to get your own points. And then you can plot your own points. Input, output. 0 is always a good choice. But you have control over this. This is an independent variable. You have power. So pick wisely. So see this denominator of 5? You want to pick multiples of 5. Because if you take a fraction that has 5 in the denominator and you multiply it by 5, 10, 15, -5, you're not going to get a decimal or a fraction for this part. So I'm going to use 5, I'm going to use 10, I'm going to use -5, -10. And just because maybe I'm afraid I'm going to make a computational error and I'm nervous and I don't want to make a mistake, I'm going to use my calculator. And again, this calculator, this is your negative key. If you're using a graphing calculator, same thing. This is your negative key. Minus and negative are different on calculators, so be cautious. All right, so what do I have? I have -3/5, and I'm not going to use a fraction key. This guy, I'm just going to type it like that, so that's why I put in parentheses. And then I'm going to not do the 0 one because I can do that in my head. So times 5 plus 2 is -1. And again, if I sub 0 in, this goes away, I get 2. Now again, some of you might be like, well, I can do that in my head. If I put a 10 here, some of you are like, oh, the 5 would cancel that 10, make it a 2. -6 plus 2 is a -4. Others of you like, that makes me super nervous because I forget how to do fractions very well. So then you just do -3, oopsie, -3/5. And then your input is 10, so times 10. And then your starting amount was plus 2. Enter, and you get -4 that way. And again, if you graph these points, you're just going to graph them. You're going to get this exact same graph. At 0, 2, you put a dot, go over 5, -1, put a dot, and then of course if you went over 10, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what is this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and go down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, your point is still on the line. So those are some options for graphing. Another option is to use a graphing calculator. So, but you do have to be able to do it by hand too. So you can't just rely on a graphing calculator. If you do a graphing calculator, you have to solve for y. And again, you have to put that in parentheses. So what is it? -3/5. And then x, and then plus 2. And then go to zoom standard so you can kind of get like a 10 by 10 graph. And then if you don't, you can just hit graph. And then you can get your graph that way. But again, if it's on a test or something, you need those points, then what you're going to have to do is go to second table and get the points from there. And again, on my math lab, don't try to graph any fractions or decimals. So go to anything that has integers. So like 0, 2, what is that? 4, no, that's a 1. Let's keep scrolling down. Oh, there we go. 10, -4 would be a good choice. And then you can go to the negative side too. So I could scroll this way. And again, there is an app for this on your phone that is free. All right, so then -5 would work. The other thing you could do is Desmos. So I don't know if I have time to get this. I only have a minute left. I might leave it here. I can send you a video on how to use Desmos for graphing as well. And I might not be by me, but there's a lot of good ones out there, so I'll just find one of those. All right, I hope this helps. Take care.